Hey guys, welcome back. Andrew here with Ambient Endeavors, and it shouldn't be a surprise to you, I don't think, to hear that ambient sounds and textures have always just kind of been at the core of how I've approached guitar. Whether it be from the kind of early days of just creating these ambient loop beds and textures with pedals like the DL4, to finding that perfect pairing of delays and reverbs to create that washy ambient sound and tone. It's just been a sound and kind of a mood that I've gravitated to in my playing and in my writing for years and years now. In different seasons in the past, I've put together huge pedal boards with a whole drive section of textures, sometimes multiple delay pedals, multiple reverb pedals, dedicated loopers, and other just sort of ambient and experimental pedals to create these ambient soundscapes and sounds and textures. But recently I've kind of realized myself pulling back and leaning a little bit more towards simplicity, leaning into smaller and more concise setups of pedals to get that ambient sound. And I wanted to shoot this video today to just talk about my 3 current essential elements for crafting my ambient sounds. If you're new to the channel, thank you so much for clicking on the video here and watching. Please hit subscribe below to stay up to date on future videos, as we've got a pretty full schedule of demos and other fun videos coming this fall and winter. And if you're just getting into ambient music, or if you've been playing it for a long time and are just kind of curious about certain elements that we're talking about in this video, or how to approach writing or crafting sounds for ambient music, drop a question or a comment below and I'd love to engage with you there. This video is sponsored by Keeley Electronics. I've been interested and kind of curious about some of their more ambient leaning releases, and I reached out to them and they were kind enough to send over a few pedals to include in this video. I'm excited to check them out and kind of see how they work in this ambient context. They're a pedal company that's kind of been around for years. I view them as one of the kind of OGs and sort of an old school leaning pedal brand. But I've been really impressed with the way that they have kind of stayed relevant and continued to innovate and kind of release products that span a whole number of different genres. And some of these pedals we're going to talk about today, I think, are really well suited for ambient context specifically. One of the things that really drew me to these specific Keeley pedals is their just kind of concise and simplified presentation. The interfaces and the control sets are really straightforward. You don't have any menus to dive through or exhaustive controls to kind of sift through or remember. And when I'm thinking about approaching ambient music in sort of the more simplistic way and the more kind of concise, stripped down fashion, using those types of pedals is essential, because I think it just helps that creativity and that workflow to just stay as streamlined and as kind of fluid as possible. When I'm writing music, I really crave that, and I kind of seek that out and try and create it. Eliminate some of the roadblocks to just moving smoothly through the creative process. And each of these pedals are laid out with control sets that are just ready for you to turn it on and turn a couple knobs and get going. I love that about each of them. I think that you don't sacrifice a lot because they sound great. And so the approachability and the simplicity of each of these 3 pedals really allows for a smooth workflow to just let you kind of find some sounds quickly and continue on through your creative process. So in that same nature of simplicity, we're going to hit on each of these 3 elements that have become essential elements to me in ambient writing. We're going to do them with some brief overviews of each of these pedals and effects. We're not going to deep dive into the controls too much or do a ton of different explorations in the sounds, but I want to give you kind of a rationale for why I'm choosing each of them, and then show you a little bit of the sounds and sort of the context with which I would utilize those elements for ambient writing. And then at the very end of the video here, we're flipping the form a little bit. I'll have a full track that's produced out with these 3 pedals and kind of that ambient post-rock context for you to just kind of hear the elements in context in a mix and get a feeling for kind of a finished product that you could imagine by utilizing these 3 elements and these 3 pedals. The first of the essential elements for creating my ambient sounds these days is compression. And that might be a little bit surprising to folks. Maybe you're wondering why it's not some sort of overdrive or textural pedal to kind of anchor the front of the chain. But what I'm kind of realizing as I've been writing ambient music recently is that I really just want something that's going to preserve the clean guitar tone before sending it on to wet effects, and not going to really color it or muddy it up with saturation or with too aggressive of EQ or clipping sort of characteristics. And so I've leaned to compressors oftentimes as the front of the chain and sometimes the only sort of textural element in the chain. Today we're including the Keeley Compressor Plus, which is literally the most popular boutique compressor pedal ever. They've sold thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of these compressors, and it sort of set the bar for compressor pedals in the market in some ways. This Compressor Plus is a really nice presentation because you have a few more controls, and it does kind of allow you to add some texture and some EQ into the equation before running on to your wet effects. And so I really like that component of the Compressor Plus. You have some traditional compressor settings and controls on the pedal, but you also have a tone knob which allows you to brighten or darken your signal. You also have a level control that can let you use it as sort of a boost and get some saturation and some kind of like gain out of the equation there too. And then some other kind of fine-tuning controls, whether you're using a humbucker or a single coil guitar, to just kind of tweak and refine that response. But what I feel like the compressor does in the ambient setting is it really just kind of smooths out your input signal. It kind of glues everything together before going into your wet effects that kind of will then scatter things out in different ways to just kind of level things out dynamically a little bit to make things feel a little bit more polished and a little bit more glued. So let's hear some of the sounds from the Keeley Compressor Plus and just kind of see and feel how it can add some glue and some just kind of dynamic tightening to your signal. The second essential element for my ambient sounds is a delay pedal, and today we're checking out the Keeley Halo Core, which is just, again, a very approachable, a really solid delay foundation that offers a little bit of tweakability and a little bit of tailoring and fine-tuning to be able to work in a few different contexts. When I think about how I use delay in ambient contexts, I kind of have three different purposes or contexts that I'll use delay for. First is just sort of a subtle echo type effect that can work to thicken up some of your melodic parts, that can just add a little bit of interesting, unique depth and dimension to your playing. The second is a more rhythmic, dynamic delay. Maybe you have a little bit higher mix and something that's creating this kind of movement and kind of more rhythmic experience in the mix. And then third, as an element to add with reverb to create sort of big, washy swell effects or other just kind of more ambient textural layers and elements. The Halo core does a really great job at all three of those. It's foundationally sort of like a warm digital delay, but one you can add a little bit of saturation to or adjust the EQ and kind of tonal profile of the delay to make a little bit more interesting. It has that Andy Timmons rhythmic delay setting, and so that kind of checks the box for the more dynamic rhythmic sound. And then it's able to kind of live in both the subtle and the big, long, kind of expansive delay sounds that work great to pair with a reverb pedal to create those ambient swells and textural moments. So let's check out some sounds from the Halo core now and see how it can exist in all three of those contexts. Finally, the third essential element for ambient sounds, and maybe the most obvious of the three, is a great reverb pedal. Today we're looking at the Keeley ZOMA, and I continue to hear and see a bunch about this pedal on social media and around the internet. A lot of people raving about this pedal and loving the sounds from it, and so I was really excited specifically to get this one in. I've used it on previous videos here too to just kind of get acclimated with it, and from the get-go it's again just really straightforward, easy to get some good sounds out of right away. and it has those classic traditional reverb sounds that you would want. It features 3 distinct modes that pair spring or plate reverb with a variety of different tremolo effects. For this video, we're just going to lean into the reverb side of sounds, and it's really kind of ideal because I tend to use plate style reverb most often when I'm writing in the ambient context. And there's just a beauty and sort of a lush quality to this plate reverb on the ZOMA that works really well for more subtle effects and also for those bigger ambient leaning kind of ethereal sounds. So we're going to lean into the plate reverb on the ZOMA here and hear how it can just add that perfect lush ambience to your notes and your swells. Let's check it out. So those are my 3 current essential elements for creating ambient sounds and textures in my playing. Thanks again to Keeley Electronics for sending these specific pedals over to look at. I think they do a great job coming together to kind of create some of those ambient sounds and textures that I find myself gravitating towards when I'm writing. And they're honestly pretty approachable in terms of price when you think of boutique pedals. And I think they're worth your time to check out, investigate, and see if they can be useful in your setup, in your writing, and in your playing. So thanks for checking out the video. We're gonna leave you with this track that I produced here with these 3 pedals and just kind of give you a flavor for what I was able to produce with these as I sat down with the Compressor Plus, the Halo Core, and the ZOMA. So enjoy it, and we'll see you on the next video. Take care.